The Cheyenne Mountains Air Force Station is the #1 DoD-rated EMP protected facility in America and is known as the America's Fortress, as they are therefore and prepared for America's worst day in history. This should wake you up to an EMP event being a serious threat. You've heard about it. You have also heard about 90% of the population would possibly not survive inside a year of an EMP event. So, while being distracted with so much during these times, you can no longer overlook the fact that you need to have you, your family, and your businesses protected now. Everything that you need to know is in this interview, which is why we are bringing it to you. Learn how to prepare yourselves now and share this with your family and friends. Much love. So welcome to TotallyT, your solutions girls, and today we are talking with Andrew of EMP Shield. You probably heard a lot of buzz about this. So Andrew, would you introduce yourself, a little bit of your background and what you're doing with EMP Shield and why?
Yeah, so hey everybody, I'm Andrew. I'm one of the owners of EMP Shield. I also serve as the Director of Marketing and Sales. A little bit about me, I did 15 years in the military, 10 years in psychological operations, and then 5 years commissioned as a medical service corps officer. I got out to come help them start this company. My degrees are in social science through Kansas State, and I have a master's in leadership through Colorado State. And I'm here primarily because of what I know in marketing, some of the things I've done previously for marketing and sales. And yeah.
What drew you to this? But this probably is not your only opportunity. I just kind of heard your resume. So you're a very valuable character. So why EMP Shield? Have you had a certain experience? Do you know the people that invited you to come work? What was it that really grabbed you, said, I really need to do this?
Well, so the first thing was friends, networking always does have a big part in what you do. So yeah, I had a friend who called who was introduced to the inventor of the EMP Shield, and they were looking to build this company, but didn't really know exactly where to start. And it's funny because, the first phone call I got, they said, hey, Andrew, we just got out of a meeting with the government with a company called EMP Shield, or soon to be company with a product called EMP Shield. And they have a EMP protection device that'll protect the entire house. Because back then it was just one product. And my first response was, no, they don't. But as I dug into it and was involved in some of the meetings, not just with the government, but with DOE and with all these different entities, realizing it's a real product and actually going to some of the testing, I was sold and I was like, sure, where do we start? And, we've grown this company into a multi-million-dollar business now. And it's just one of the big things for me that really drew me in was the ability to not only have a company that has a great product, but also something that helps people. And it's also a realm that I've always been interested in. And I won't lie, up until I heard about the company, I was not an expert in EMP. To date now, EMP Shield is considered one of the top experts in EMP on the corporate or civilian side. And of course, we're serving as advisors in government roles and organizations now as well. But it's been a big learning curve for me. My expertise really came in with sales and marketing and having learned the stuff over a few years now. So.
Very good. Let's go ahead and start here. People don't know what an EMP event is. I've heard people think that what protects your home from an EMP is simply a power surge protector.
Right.
Let's clear up. What is it and why do they need the EMP Shield? Okay.
Sure. Well, and so I think the most important thing to do is kind of dispel what the myths are. So I'll generally explain what an EMP is, and then I'll go into why the device works and why others don't work. So starting with an EMP, we'll use a nuclear weapon in the atmosphere as an example. So what happens is you have a nuclear weapon that goes off in all directions. So it's pushing up towards the magnetosphere, and it's also blasting downwards towards the atmosphere. What you have with a nuclear weapon is you have gamma radiation and then matter that follows suit into the atmosphere. So with an EMP, you actually have 3 phases. And so the reason I'm prefacing with this is to explain how those 3 phases occur. The first is gamma radiation, which is the faster portion of that blast that hits the atmosphere. So when that hits the atmosphere, it creates a thing called ionization, which basically in layman's terms means that because of that, freed electrons are then shot off towards the Earth in all directions of the blast. And so what we're dealing with in EMP is freed electrons coming down from the atmosphere. It's the same thing with the second phase of the EMP, which is called the E2, except for instead of the gamma radiation causing ionization, you've got the matter that follows the gamma radiation that causes the ionization, the freed electrons, in a slower phase in microseconds, the E1s in nanoseconds. These are both very fast amounts of time, but microseconds is actually much, much slower than nanoseconds. And of course, you have picoseconds, which I'll talk about here in a little bit as well. With the third phase of an EMP, like I explained, that nuclear weapon pushes out on that magnetosphere. And so the magnetosphere is round, it has a spherical shape around the Earth, and it likes to maintain that shape. So when you push out, almost like a balloon that has a thinner portion of rubber, there's a bubble that forms, and then you have a fluctuation of that magnetosphere. And that fluctuation is almost like when you wave a magnet over a piece of metal. There's a slow charge that builds on the surface. And it's the same concept with the magnetosphere fluctuating, is then you have a slow AC charge on the surface of the Earth, as where the E1 and the E2 are actually DC voltage. It's DC energy. And so when we're talking about protection from EMP, what we're looking at is the ability to actually be fast enough to pull the heat or pull the energy from the system so that heat is not generated. It's actually not the induction of electricity or energy into a system that causes damage. It's the heat generating, which fries microprocessors and things that have substances like silicon arsenide that cracks. And so that's what's causing the damage when you have the induction of freed electrons through an EMP. And so to kind of explain what happens is when you have these phases come down with freed electrons from the E1 and E2, they're inducing into everything on the grid. That means the grid itself, that could be vehicles, that could be your home. It goes straight through the structure of your house into anything that will induce electrons. So your TV, your refrigerator, everything. And so what we're doing with the EMP shield is we're passively monitoring the electrical system, waiting for the induction or the input from the grid in either direction of raised electricity over a certain voltage. And when we see that over voltage, we then pull that voltage to the ground wire. Now, specifically, this is referring to a house. There's many different systems, which I can explain. And so what we do is we actually pull right now we're pulling in roughly 500 trillionths of a second, which is half a nanosecond, which is over 100 times faster than what the military says the standard should be. And all of these are third-party independently tested. We went to a place called Keystone Compliance. It's one of the few places in the nation that's military certified, the Boeings, the Lockheeds. They go there to test for EMP and for other things as well. So we went there just to verify. Right now, we're actually working with Idaho National Labs on request from the Department of Energy to get their stamp so that we can kind of do some more DOE type business, that requires their stamp. But that'll also be another, third-party organization, at a much even better level, verifying the products and, of course, new technologies that probably the normal world may not ever see, but we've got a whole series of technologies that we're working on. And so generally speaking, that's what an EMP is and how we protect against it.
So has an EMP event ever occurred before? If so, when and where?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, yeah. So, of course, we had the Carrington event in 1859, which is one of the more well-known, largest solar flare. And solar flare is a type of EMP that occurred in 1859. It's significant, though. You're talking about that was the equivalent of millions of nuclear weapons going off in the atmosphere. If that happened right now, obviously the grid's not quite prepared. They're working on, there was a National Defense Authorization Act and executive order providing funding and in law to start protecting the grid. But yes, so it has occurred in the past. It's just kind of, some people say it's a cyclical event. We know that solar flares happen all the time. It's just a matter of if or when the next one does hit the Earth, because the Earth's spinning and it just depends on where the flare comes out from the sun. But there are people that monitor this on a daily basis. It is considered a threat, obviously to the nation, to the world. So solar flares do happen on they do happen. And as far as nuclear weapons, there was testing done, I believe in the 50s. This is where they originally, realized, I believe it was over Hawaii, and they were testing the atmospheric effects of nuclear weapons. And forgive me, I don't remember the exact name of the operation. But basically what they discovered was the impact on the ground, which they weren't prepared for. And they did have measurements of the event, this initial nuclear blast in the atmosphere, but they didn't get complete measurements. But it was the first indicator. They're like, holy cow, it going off in the atmosphere had impacts on the ground. And that's where they started really studying EMP from there. And then they kind of moved forward from there. Since then, there's been the EMP Commission. There's been many reports and studies and groups that have gone out and done testing and really done research on the impact of an EMP. To date, we have, the Department of Homeland Security. The EMP Commission has since been disbanded, but there is organizations within the government that are still actively studying and working to protect against EMPs. So it is a serious threat to the country.
So is an EMP something that can be used as a weapon against a city, a country? Like, absolutely.
Yeah, so absolutely. So, not only is a nuclear weapon capable of causing the EMP, but there is directional EMP weapons that are being created, microwave type weapons that can be created and used as well, as a, from an enemy against the United States. So
I believe with unrest, as we're seeing today, and people really don't know what direction, who's behind what's going to happen. I think people are waking up to the fact that if this doesn't take us out, this could be used against us. And we pay our insurance every month. We have life insurance. We live in a nice neighborhood, and nothing bad ever happened. This type of thing. But I really think that people are now waking up to the fact that you wake up, you go to work, you pay your bills, you pay for your insurance, and now all of a sudden it protects you. If something were to happen, we'll make it through, yada, yada, yada. And I think that it needs to be impressed upon. This is the one thing that I feel and Anita feel has been overlooked because we've been looking over here or we've been looking over there. Let's not forget about this. And EMP needs to protect your cars, your trucks, your motorcycles, your home. There's a lot of things that it needs to protect, and a surge protector is not going to do it. You'd have to have an EMP field. So I'm going to give this over to Anita because I know she's probably been jotting down notes. She's always very gracious, and she waits until I finish with my questions and ramblings. Anita?
Well, Andrew, thanks for your time today. I think what you were referring to is the Manhattan Project. That started in 1945 when they started testing nuclear. And that took place, I think, in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where they did the first U.S. testing on that. It's a kind of a quandary that people have because they hear about these things, but they really don't intricately understand what you're talking about with EMP. I've seen information about this many times, but until it becomes relevant, because people hear about it and that happens over on that other island, that happens over in another place. It happens in Minneapolis, but it doesn't happen in my town, right?
Right, exactly.
This is a very critical time. As we have people who will use technology such as what we're talking about. Some of it's natural and some of it's nurtured by people who are trying to have an effect for a reason and be able to control other people. And so this is a time that we can't just lackadaisical say, I'm just not interested in that. Because I was sitting at my veranda the other night, and all of a sudden, every light in the area started flickering and then you heard this buzzing sound. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what is happening?
Exactly.
And I'm running to unplug everything, even though I've got protection systems that are more common in place, and a little freaked out because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have am I going to survive this? Am I going to have to replace every electronic device in my world? And having the knowledge of what you're talking about here, unfortunately, on the backside, you can't come and band-aid it. It completely annihilates when it affects, and the heat actually melts the internal guts. It liquefies. And so I have a little bit of working knowledge because I work with some frequency technology. Frequency is very effective. It can block maybe the use of your devices. And the EMP, my question to you is this.
Mm-hmm.
There are devices that can quote, disable electronic function. Does this EMP work on that level as well as a major assault?
And so I'll start with an actual myth that a lot of people don't understand. You'll see movies and TV shows where an EMP goes off and their phone doesn't turn back on and their computer doesn't turn back on. I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but there's actually EMI requirements inside of modern day laptops and inside of modern day cell phones. Your iPhone 10 or 11, it may turn off, but it's probably going to turn back on. However, that's not the case for other devices that don't have EMI requirements. So yes, a lot of devices are going to cease to function, especially any device that has microprocessors or finite electronics inside of them that can induce and generate and have that heat will probably more than likely be destroyed. So basically, EMI is electromagnetic interference. It's because of certain requirements for safety and for the basically the distribution of certain waves and certain frequencies from devices outwards and inwards. There's certain requirements for safety built into cell phones and computers. And basically what that means is your computer, modern day laptop, has almost like a Faraday cage built into it. It's probably not a complete Faraday cage, so there will be gaps, but it's enough to deter those frequencies from coming in and out of the device for safety reasons.
So that would be protected to certain megahertz or what people
That's
would
correct.
understand.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
So that is a wealth of information for the common person. That
right.
At least we have something in here to start our.
That's
health,
right.
As we talk, Tony and I often we talk about health assurance.
Yes.
Of our devices.
Mm-hmm.
What you are representing with this technology is another level.
That's correct.
Of something that would be abnormal, intentional to cause a certain fact.
That's correct. Exactly. And so actually, if you don't mind, I'll explain a little bit, because most people might be thinking to themselves, well, if my cell phone's not going to be affected, because cell phones, computers, these are things that people want to protect. So here's what's actually going to happen is a lot of people, just like me, every night we plug in our computer and we plug in our cell phone. Now, because even though they have EMI shielding, now that you've plugged them in, they're now connected to your house, which is a large antenna. And so your house, the antenna, is going to induce these electrons, and that energy will go into your device and destroy it. And that's where the EMP shield comes into play. These devices are protected on their own, but when they're plugged in, now they're vulnerable, and that's where we come in to protect.
There's so many questions I could ask. I want to make sure that we get to the most important things. So is there any particular matter, we're talking a soil, water, blah, 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 that the EMP doesn't work in? I mean, does it for instance, if you are working underground, do you need EMP? If you're doing something submerged, do you need that? Does it work on boats? I mean, all these different things. What is the environmental application for what you offer?
Well, we're looking at different things like water and soil. There is penetration levels to that. And so, for instance, we have seen times where an EMP will not go a certain depth into water or may not go a certain depth into the ground. We've also seen reflection off the ground, and off of water as well from an EMP. Now, for applications, as far as EMP shield goes, if you have any kind of electronic, we probably have an application to protect it, because we protect pretty much every level of AC all the way up to grid level with different technology, and then every level of DC as well. So that would include solar, any vehicle platform or application, 12, 24, 48 volts we protect. A good example of that would be we're actually teamed up with a company called Resvani Motors. They make a tank, and so we have the EMP protection inside of their Resvani tank. Talk about solar systems, generators, and this is another myth, and it really kind of like the cell phones and computers, you have companies trying to sell you something, which capitalism in America, that's okay. I just want everybody to understand that you probably don't need to buy a $30 pouch for your cell phone. You also more than likely don't need to buy a Faraday bag for a smaller generator, especially if it's pull start and mechanically driven. Inside of a mechanically driven generator, there's really nothing to be destroyed. So anytime I see like a 5K generator and they're selling a $400 EMP bag, it just kind of makes me cringe a little bit. So buyer, just beware. Unless you have an electronic ignition or some kind of a fancy automatic start with that would have microelectronics, there's really nothing inside of a motor that would be damaged from an EMP. So you have vehicle platform, solar, any AC system. We also do 3-phase applications, and it's a big portion of our business for industrial, that have large machines. They use 3-phase, 120, 208, 277, 480 and such. So yeah, we kind of delve into every different type of application.
Basically, if you're not protected, what would life without electricity look like for you?
Yes. Yeah. And so is that kind of a question to me? Because I'd be happy to answer on the impacts of an EMP.
Well, when I asked, could this actually be targeted to a specific area, specific city, that type of thing? I'm like, well, what happens if let's just say you did protect your vehicle, you were able to go to the gas station, but the gas station, for one, be open.
Sure. Right.
And another thing, are you even going to be able to get gas out of it?
That's right. And there's a high likelihood you probably won't be able to. It's the same with communications. I mentioned before your cell phone will probably still function. It's not going to be getting a signal. Those towers are going to be down. And this is another thing that most people don't understand. The only form of communication that will still happen after an EMP is HF communications. UHF, VHF, and cell phone towers are going to be down. There's only certain frequencies that will still be able to pass through the air and off the atmosphere during and after an EMP. So that's something that a lot of people don't understand. The impact of an EMP could be incredibly significant. You have some people saying up to 90% of the population. Some people, I believe that would be the Department of Homeland Security. 90% of the country might die or be dead after 1 year prior to an EMP. You're going to have basically no running water, because we use electricity to push water, other than gravity-fed systems. Communications are down. Your house is no longer getting electricity, and it's not just the grid itself that's down. You've got nuclear power plants that are down, or anything that's gas. So those are down and not producing electricity, which we're working on a solution to fix. It's just not there yet. So at this time, if that were to occur, there's an issue. The next thing is think about, because it's not just the impact initially from an EMP, but it's the long-term impact. So the grid's destroyed. Now you have to rebuild it, but that's a problem because, vehicles aren't functioning anymore. So just to get to certain portions of the grid, some of them you have to use a helicopter, or you have to, take a vehicle and go to that place to fix the transformer or to fix the substation. And so even just being able to rebuild the grid could take a long, long time. So the impact's very significant. I would almost say that the impact on a home and electronics is very minor compared to the impact on the nation as a whole, and from a national grid standpoint. However, inside your home, the main basic things that keep you comfortable, like air conditioning, you're not going to have that anymore unless your system's protected and you have a backup power system. Because that's a common question I get is, well, Andrew, what good is this if the grid's down? And I'm like, it's a valid question. Here's the answer. You have to protect your AC system, and you have to have a backup power system. With a backup power system, you can still power your house after an EMP. And a lot of people have those, off-grid systems, but a lot of people are now like, crap, I got to put that on my list, and so now they're out shopping for a solar system. But in reality, without protection and without that, you won't have any power after an EMP occurs. So,
yeah. So let me just break this down. Let's just create a picture, and it sounds apocalyptic, basically.
Yeah, it does sound that.
Not trying to really scare people, but just try to let you know something that you were never educated in high school or college about. Nobody's really talking. Nobody wants to talk about things that are a little bit scary. And especially when you're like, I can't afford one more thing in my life. I can't even afford insurance. What's important to you, you're going to work it out. Do what you need to do for your family. Point here, why we're bringing this to you now is because you have to be aware this can happen. It can happen at any point in time. So what would it be like? Well, talked about life without electricity. I don't know, but I'm pretty pretty dependent on my air conditioner and my heater. On my electric stove, I could probably figure out how to make a fire outside if I just had to, right? But that is just saying that your house didn't go up in flames because you didn't have it protected with the EMP shield, because that is it's a high likelihood that
That's
could
right.
happen. And that could happen.
That's right.
So let's just say that didn't happen, but all I do is on my phone and on my computer, which happens to need charging quite often. So that might be fried. There goes my business, right? What if I didn't have my vehicle protected? I'm going nowhere. My life changed like that.
That's correct.
What about our energy sources, our oil? We talked about gas. What happens with that? I mean, very quickly, our lives are changed in a moment's notice.
That's right.
So, yeah, I think that this has to be something that is on your priority list. Everybody has a list of priorities. This is something that's just got to go on your priority list. If you own a business and you have a fleet of vehicles, what's going to happen? You just lost your business. Do you have your place of business protected? Right? This is what I'm thinking is like, this could turn everything around for people. You think you can go to the ER and get services in emergency situations. We really need to think, what is the top thing that you need to have protected, and start there. Do you have anything else?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. Something that a lot of people don't consider is lightning. They just focus on the EMP. It is kind of doom and gloom talking about it. It's a really kind of an odd subject to talk about, but it's important to educate people. In fact, Department of Homeland Security's #1 priority on EMP is to raise awareness, which we're working to help with, tied with them to try to raise awareness, which is why part of the reason I'm on the show now, and I really appreciate the ability to help spread the information. But lightning is a daily and significant occurrence across the United States. We're in Kansas, and I heard we just got raised to the #2 state in the nation for lightning, but we've seen the impacts here, and it's significant. It's actually it's an accidental secondary effect or impact of the EMP shield, which was not planned to be. It was designed for EMP, but we realized very quickly that it is a 100% lightning protection system based on the speed and the way it's designed and how robust it is. Just for anybody who's watching, we actually had over 20 houses get hit last year with lightning. All of them called as part of the warranty because we guarantee protection, and they said, hey, we got hit. We don't have any damage, just want the replacement. And we're like, cool, that's great. Send it back so we can take a look. Here's your new one. But they work. In fact, we had a cul-de-sac about 3 weeks ago in Florida get hit. There's 5 houses on the cul-de-sac. Only the one with the EMP shield survived. The other ones all had damage. So, just from a lightning perspective, it's cheaper than, and I'm just saying this for a reason, is it's cheaper than your deductible on your house. If you own a house, the average deductible is $500. A home EMP shield's around $300. And we replace it if you get hit with lightning. It's usually a $50 charge, but usually when they call me or somebody calls and then they'll say, hey, pass it to Andrew, I'll probably give you one for free anyways, because we like to inspect the one that got hit. So it's a big deal. We're kind of revolutionizing the surge protection market, but that wasn't really our intention. So,
well, I have to just jump in here for just a moment because I live in Colorado. We have significant lightning, and we are really close to God here. And so, the power of lightning is pretty amazing when they look at the statistics of the damage to a structure. A lot of people are thinking, oh my gosh, my computer doesn't work. Well, what you may not know is that entire wiring in your home has been completely melted. If you didn't have a fire, you're very fortunate. It may have actually cracked the bricks in the structure of your home and shattered wood. So this is not I just want to protect my cell phone or my computer. This is immense. So can you kind of talk about how the EMP shield actually works on a very basic thing, a home?
Yeah, exactly. Sure. So I'll kind of go elaborate a little bit more on how I explained it before. So the first thing that makes the EMP Shield unique is its ability to look both directions on a line. And so I'll explain what that means. It's a Type 2 device, although we are, some energy companies are selling a Type 1 version of it from us. It's a Type 2 device that you install onto your home's breaker box. And so from that position, we're looking inwards into the house up to 10,000 square feet. That system's primarily, that reason's primarily designed for the induction of electrons for EMP, but it is looking inside the house. So if a lightning strike were to hit the roof, we can't protect the roof itself. We're not magical, but we can protect the electrical system. We're also looking out 250 linear feet towards the grid. So anything within 250 linear feet that is hit, it's protected. And so what we're doing is when we see that rise in voltage, and part of the reason we're able to see it and act so quickly is because, well, this makes sense. The reason that it's effective is because of the speed in which it sees that rise in voltage and is able to pull it fast. And so like we talked about before, the current model's shunting. Shunting is drawing that electricity from the system. So we shunt in 500 trillionths of a second, half a nanosecond, which is, I don't want to speak for every device on the market because I haven't tested every single one, but as far as we know, we're 10 times faster than the next closest device. So then when you're talking nanoseconds, that's very, very, very fast. So we see that spike and we pull it to the ground faster than it can actually penetrate the house. While we're pulling the electricity, we're also, and if it's coming from the grid, and if it's a certain duration in time. So like an E1 and E2 are so fast, it doesn't matter. We're shunting to ground, nothing else is happening, the house is safe. But for the E3, it's a low and slow kind of build in electricity and build and charge on the grid, which is coming into the house. It's kind of the same thing with lightning, except for lightning's a massive amount of electricity. We're talking millions and millions of volts of electricity, but it's still much longer than an E1 and E2, which is in nanoseconds and microseconds. And so what the device is doing is it sees the rise in voltage, it immediately begins to shunt 500 trillionths of a second, and then after a certain duration, it's popping the breaker before the remainder of that energy can come into the house. That's mainly for the E3 and for lightning, but just popping that breaker alone and shunting the energy that does go in before the breakers pop, we're able to protect the house because that initial amount of electricity is devastating. The secondary amount that follows is stopped. So, yeah.
So, explain the significance in popping the breaker.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great question because a lot of people don't understand. A breaker means, so we're talking about the main breaker on a home's breaker box. This is what controls the ability for the electricity to go into your house. So when the breaker's on, the electricity is going straight in. When the breaker's off, it's going to go boop, and it's going to stop right there and not be able to go into your house because there's no connection on those wires into the home, if that makes sense.
It's like the door is open or the door is shut.
That's exactly correct.
And when the door is shut, there is a disconnect.
Yep, there's nothing that can enter the house from the grid. That's exactly correct.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony.
What I would do if I make a list, just like I did, whatever's most important to you, to me, it's my house. I'm protecting my house first. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm protecting my vehicle. I do not have an RV to protect. I don't have a boat to protect. I don't have a motorcycle to protect, although people in my family do. So what we did as a family group was got together is let's kind of make sure one person in the family has a vehicle that's protected. This has to be something that goes, when you buy a home, you're going to get a washer and a dryer. That comes with a home, right? You have to have that. And you're going to have a refrigerator. This is a must. You have to have the EMP shield. That's part of it. Now, let me ask you, Andrew, is there any kind of benefits with insurance?
Yeah, so we have been made aware that several of the larger insurance companies do offer a slightly lower rates for having surge protection that's UL 1449 certified in the home. I don't have a list in front of me here, but we have had customers say that they do get it, and we've had some customers say that we don't get it. So it's kind of a matter of what company you go with. However, because we are 1449 certified, we do fall into that category with some companies. From EMP Shield stance, we are working with policymakers and some government and politicians to try to kind of get this going in the right direction for more insurance companies. But right now, I'm sure most of you guys are aware that politics and policy making is not an easy overnight thing. It takes a long amount of time, and it takes a lot of credibility and knowing the right people. So we're working on it. But what I'd say for right now is, if you're interested in trying to get a reduction in your insurance, it doesn't hurt to ask your insurance company. Let them know that we're 1449 certified, which is not an easy thing to get. It just means that you're lightning protection certified, and just see what you can get. So yeah.
Well, I think that's wonderful. It's on the top of my list. And listen, guys, what EMP Shield is doing for us and our followers is they're offering. What are you offering? I forgot. What's
$50 off. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everybody can get $50 off per product.
That's great. So I would say go in there, and I'll put it in the description box, but I think it's just TotallyT is the little promo code that you use. So let me tell you, I've reached out to Andrew, and just, the email address, the phone number, great guys. And by the way, where is this product made, Andrew?
Yeah, so we're in Burlington, Kansas. That's a little tiny town about 45 minutes south of Topeka. We do have a multi-million-dollar production facility. And this is something a lot of people ask, like, oh, this Chinese made. Nope. To comply with government regulations for government contracting, we're 100% sourced in America and 100% hand-built in Kansas, everything. So it's all made right here in Burlington, but which some people almost can't believe. They think we'd be out of New York or something, but no, we're not.
There's one more thing I'd like to ask about. On different promotional things, it's out there, the EMP Shield is protecting the Texas grid. Makes it sound like all of Texas is already protected. Hey, I'm in Texas. You guys want to move here? You're welcome. But let's dispel what the misunderstanding is.
And we need to, because it's being incorrectly portrayed. So we are a part of a group with the government that's doing a pilot program for the grid. And so, and a lot of people are aware, I think we touched on it earlier, but an executive order just for EMP was created, basically stating that the government needs to be protected. That was followed up on with a National Defense Authorization Act that then took the money and fit it with the executive order. So now there's funding for this. And so basically we're serving alongside the government, Department of Energy, electrical companies to protect a portion of the grid. And once that is approved, then the organizations and the government can move on to larger chunks of the grid, which we can't really go too in depth into, but it is occurring right now. And as soon as that's completed, we can start doing other levels of protection. So no, it's not the whole state of Texas. We all wish it was. It's not the time yet, because a lot of the technologies aren't proven yet. And that's what the pilot program's for, is to say, hey, we've got these technologies, let's actually zap them, make it work, make sure it works, and then move forward from there, because we hate to spend billions of dollars protecting the country for it to not work.
Thank you for listening in. I know that you're very well educated now, and you know what you need to do at this point to protect your family, your household, your businesses. Go to EMPshield.com and use TotallyT, written all as one word, so you can receive $50 off of each shield.